Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, Chris Tobin and I are talking about pop-up studios, and Gary Kline joins us live from the back of his limo in Paris, France, to talk about how they're using pop-up studios in Europe. That's all coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store, with outstanding service, savings, and support online at bgs.cc. By the Ruby console from Lavo. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. And by Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower and all the stuff in between. And this week, we've got a cool topic that it's just all come together here at the last minute. So I'm excited to talk about it. And I'll tell you what it is in just a second. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. I'm in my beautiful Telos Alliance studios in Nashville, Tennessee, in my home office. So glad to be here. I do work for the Telos Alliance, so if we, say something positive about them, it's just because I know all about their equipment. And speaking of equipment, we do have people from other equipment manufacturers coming up in the next few weeks. In fact, our guest next week is my friend Tom Hartnett from Comrex. So you'll want to tune in for that. Next week, he'll be talking about doing remote TV broadcasts and also their new Earshot product. That's kind of interesting for IFBs, I guess for people in studio, but we'll find out all about that coming up. And right now, let's bring in my co-host, Chris Tobin. He is loyal. He's here, and he's ready. Aren't you, Chris?
I absolutely am. I'm in my Newark facilities, and let me get this positioned right. So yeah, I'm having a good time. All set to go, and our topic tonight, or whatever time you're watching and listening, is actually going to be fun stuff, and both radio and TV folks can enjoy it.
Well, in fact, some of the pictures that we have to show, I'll tease it just a little bit. So our foreign correspondent reported in from Paris today. That's right. Gary Kline was going to be our guest, but apparently dinner just got served. So they eat late there. It's 11:04 p.m. in Paris, and dinner just came to the table. So, but Gary sent along some interesting photographs, and actually, this was a topic that Chris suggested we talk about today, and that is the topic of pop-up studios, pop-up radio, pop-up studios. And this is a term that actually was completely new to me until about 2 years ago. So Chris and I will have some interesting things to talk about, to dish on about that, and we'll have some photos. And Chris, you mentioned television. There's TV going on in these studios too. Is that? I guess that's where radio's going. Is that what I see?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We're doing multimedia now. That's TV. What is TV? It's radio with pictures.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting too. Well, we'll get into it when we look at the picture. So I want to talk about is this radio with cheap television or low production quality television, or is this actually pretty good? It can be good, or is it? I don't know. Is it content worth watching? I guess that's up to the content creator, huh?
That's exactly what it comes to. Just like in the early days of television, was it worthwhile? Was it live? What did they think of? What, we're going to put Bob Hope in front of a camera? What do you think is going to happen? He was a radio star at the time, and
true.
So you know what? Fast forward later on, and now you have popular radio hosts, whether it be in the morning or afternoon, doing television. Well, Tom Joyner back in the day was the busiest man in radio. He was going from Chicago to Dallas and doing a radio show. Imagine if he had some video with that. Wow!
Oh yeah,
a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, Tom Joyner, the fly jock. Well, we'll have these images from Paris. I got a few words from Gary Kline, and of course, Chris Tobin has a lot of his own thoughts about this, and I have mine as well. I'm gonna take a couple pot shots of this whole idea and let Chris correct me. Okay. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by our friends at Vox Pro. You know them. They're just terrific. They make this fantastic device for your studio and great software too. Let's have a quick look. We'll be right back with talking about pop-up studios.
Yo, what's up? Live from NAB 2018. Hey, it's Caden. You need to check out Wheatstone and Vox Pro 7.1. The upgrades are amazing. If you're a jock, if you're a talent, producer, whatever, morning show, Everyone knows Vox Pro, everyone uses Vox Pro, everyone loves Vox Pro, but now the features for this year, 2018, on 7.1 are amazing. If you're using version 4.5.6 and you go to 7, this is exactly what you're missing right here. The features are a game changer. It's going to cut down your editing time by like 80% depending on what you use Vox Pro for. And with version 7.1, introducing unlimited Practic button bars right here, hotkeys right here. I'm going to show you coming out of a song.
Bad things. It's a lot of bad things that they wish and they wish and they wish and they wish.
So you're coming out of your song?
Yeah.
Start your next song right here. It's basically an entire production room right on Vox Pro. So it's the Vox Pro we know and love with a ton more features. And now this is the ultimate game changer right here. Effect macros. So instead of hitting your effects button bar and going up here using your mouse for every effect, you do it right here with one click of the mouse, and you're going to cut down your editing time by about 80% without even touching this new sexy black controller. Check it out right here, Wheatstone Vox Pro 7.1 at NAB in Vegas 2018.
And you can also check it out at our sponsor, Broadcasters General Store. They are bringing you, a variety of manufacturers that bring you some cool equipment. And one of them is Vox Pro. And you can go to bgs.cc or you can give them a call. I encourage you to give them a call because the folks at Broadcaster General Store are fun to talk to. Hey, they don't waste your time with a bunch of chit-chat, even though they're friendly. Call them at 352-622-7700. It's 352-622-7700. I've been dealing with them for years, ever since, back in the early 1990s. I was doing engineering work for Sam Phillips, the guy who created Sun Studios, the guy who discovered Elvis, and he had some radio stations, and we were fixing some and building others. And Sam always says, "Kirk, you call my girlfriend down there, Candy or Carrie, down there at BGS." And so I got acquainted with them back in the early 90s, and they are just terrific. Thanks a lot, BGS, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech, and thanks to Vox Pro for being on the show as well. All right, Chris Tobin, pop-up studios. Tell me what a pop-up studio is, and I'm going to ask you a serious question.
Well, pop-up studios could be, they're equivalent to a pop-up restaurants, things popping up. It's a radio station that just appears out of nowhere at a location, maybe an event, festivals, or, things of that sort. Maybe you're looking to engage or showcase an event or a topic, and you just need to get to the audience get right in front of them, be right there in the thick of it, if you will. And there's nothing new. It's been around for a while, and we've actually done it over the years. We've just had a more restrictive or constrictive means by which we could do it, a dedicated phone line or moving forward to ISDN and DSL and even just a cellular phone with a little mini jack plugged into it. That would be a pop-up studio for some. And now we've got technology that allows us to do it even more creatively, easier, maybe faster, more efficient. There's a few things you can do. Back in 2016, the BBC started doing pop-up radio studios to reach the audience and to start expanding out. I think BBC 2 and 4 were doing it. So now it's become a regular thing. And there's a station group, 14 stations in Belgium, the Flemish radio stations that are one of their stations or two of their stations. Most of the presenters that you hear are doing their broadcast day from their homes. And one or two of them went on the road. I think they came here to the States to do a broadcast using a pared down version of their pop-up studio that they use in their homes. So think of that. If you can easily move about and move anywhere and do stuff on the moment's notice, you now have programming and content that becomes even more engaging. And that's the stuff we've tried to do 20, 30 years ago. What was it to do a broadcast from a diner to promote your morning show, to promote something to get the diaries going? So you had Diary Thursday, so everybody was on location somewhere. Now you can do it at the drop of a hat or drop of a smartphone. And, you're limited by your imagination. And, Gary is overseas in Paris doing his work and talking to folks. And I'm sure the studios we're going to see, the pictures we're going to see, that is, are quite impressive and probably explain a lot. And I mentioned earlier, television can do the same thing. I mean, TV's been doing pop-up, news broadcasts, sportscasts, and, momentary stuff with their ENG trucks, the microwave trucks. But now you can even be more involved. And it's interesting, the available technology. Sadly, though, I think there are less creative people behind the camera or the microphone that are in our business compared to those who are non-traditional broadcast revenue creators.
Well, I would agree with that. And so now I first heard this term pop-up studio or pop-up station probably just a couple of years ago on a project that ended up not happening. But it was a European guy who was giving me this phrase, pop-up studio. And I'm the whole time I'm scratching my head, pop-up studio, pop-up. What is exactly he talking about? And once I figured it out, I said, "Oh, you mean a remote?" And he's, "Yes, that is what you Americans call it." So I get it. It's a remote, but it's kind of a fancy remote because back in the day, when I worked for a little standalone daytime only AM station in Danville, Kentucky, our pop-up studio was the trunk lid of the station car, right? And we had the Marty antenna on a little mic stand sitting next to us, right? And the Marty transmitter, we'd run the cord into the local to business, whether it was, the local Buy Right shopping center we were in front of or the Ford dealer. And we put a banner out, and we didn't play our records from there, but we did interview people. We talked from there, we interviewed people, and we gave, pizza and corn dogs and out and, cup of Coke, things like that. So, these pop-up studios, we'll take a look at them in just a minute because they're pretty nice. I was thinking also when I was the engineer for a rock station in Lexington, Kentucky, it was WKQQ. We had a big honking neon lighted desk that we had to rent a U-Haul truck. The station didn't have a truck big enough to carry the thing. So we'd actually rent a truck every week. It was part of the cost of the remote. We'd go out, it was usually at a bar. We'd take this big thing. It took 2 roadies and me to set it up because this thing was heavy. It was this beautiful, beautiful logoed desk. And we wouldn't play music from there either, but we would, talk to people. We had several microphones, headphones. We had a whole remote kit set up and neon lights, the logo in neon. It was great looking. I guess that was really a pop-up studio, wasn't it? How does that fit with your definition, Chris?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I worked at a radio station. What was it, back in 1986, 87, program director came up with this harebrained idea, as the general manager, president of the station said. And the harebrained idea was to broadcast from a storefront window for the holiday season, for the Christmas holiday, to raise toys for tots. And it was something he had seen at another radio station somewhere else in the country. And we're like, well, so what do you want to do? A remote, basically. He goes, yeah, but I want to build a studio in the window. Like, what? He goes, yeah, let's have the carts. We had carts, so we were playing carts, music on cart. And we put cart machines, a mixing console, and the DJ, the presenter, in the window. The one caveat he had was that the listeners who come up to the window to engage what we're doing can't come behind the window, can't come into the window itself. They have to talk to us through the magic microphone, which is on the other side of the glass, next to the box for the toys, and the United States Marine Corps officer who's standing next to it. And everyone in the room, in the conference room, was like, what? He goes, think about it. It's a radio station. We've come out of the box. The box on the kitchen table is now in front of you, and you can talk to it and see what's happening on the other side of the box. Think about what he was saying in 1987. Okay, you could come out to the storefront, look through the window, see your afternoon DJ that you're familiar with on the radio that you've listened to on the box, little Walkman, whatever you had. Now you can see, hear, and talk to them. Fast forward to today, the pop-up studio concept is still the same, still a remote, but now you can do even more.
Well, I'll tell you what, a lot of people listening to this podcast are viewing it. I hope you're viewing it because we got some pictures to show. So if you're listening, note what time, go back and look at the video version because we're going to see these studios. But Chris, we have gotten a lot fancier with these studios. So let's take a look at them. Suncast is going to show them. I don't care what order you do. Here we go. This is at a conference that's going on right now in Paris. This is Salon de la Radio in Paris. Excuse my horrible French accent. And actually, this is the booth of a company that makes infrastructure possible for easily doing radio out and about. In fact, their idea is you don't even need a broadcast facility. That's called, I think it's pronounced SAOOTI, and that's SAOOTI. So that company has this online service where you create your radio station in the cloud. You make accounts for your presenters, for your people doing news or reports, your weather, and everybody can contribute remotely into this thing. And then you schedule it all, and bam, it all just plays. It's designed for online. But I know Chris and I both know there are technologies out there that are going to make it reasonable to broadcast from a cloud infrastructure to a bona fide transmitter site. So let's look at the next picture here and see what's next. Okay, yeah, same place. They have programming, producing, partnering, transmission, or diffusion as they call it in France. So that's one studio. Now here is a studio, Chris, where you got video going on. They have a little audio mixer. You see that? That's a little Windows / Linux computer, the Wedge computer there, kind of in the middle of the screen. And I'm not sure what app they're running or if it was custom made for them. Chris, maybe you recognize it with the faders on it?
No, I don't. I don't recognize it offhand.
The developers where I work at Telos, our developers have done numerous things like this. And so, with Telos gear or there's some others too out there, you can make yourself a little fader box like this. But obviously they're doing video. What do you think about that, Chris? You recognize the software?
What is that software? That looks like, oh, wait a minute. Is that Telestream? Not sure.
Might be.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it looks like
I was thinking Telestream.
They have different Wirecast. They have all different names for it nowadays. But but see, this is where things have evolved. I mean, a pop-up studio, call it a remote outside broadcast, an OB event, whatever the case is. The idea is to engage the audience, and we can do it so much better because now the audience is accustomed to seeing and hearing things and being more engaged than they were 20 or 30 years ago.
So let's look at the next picture. We'll see some more pictures of this studio. Just another shot of them producing it. Of course, there's a LaCie hard drive there with the orange case around it. Very French product. Let's look at next. Okay, there we have some more gear. There is an audio processor in that rack. Looks like there's some Wheatstone blades in there. So maybe the Wedge product there is a Wheatstone remote fader product. All right, and they're looking at what's coming back over the website there. Obviously, next one. There we go. There's the whole picture. So look, there's big monitors there for the audience to see. I'm not really seeing the cameras. They're in there amongst all the other infrastructure, but obviously there's cameras on all four of the participants that are on air. Looks like they're probably also promoting a company called Broadcast Associates. Yeah, there's a little Wedge mixer right there. What's next? There we go. Maybe we can get a view of the cameras.
Yes, the camera's on the upper right above the gentleman's shoulder. You'll see it right there. It's on a platform. It's a PTZ camera.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's why I had the PTZ controller. Yeah.
Yeah, on the wide shot, you can see it in the back. Directly above in the center frame, you'll see the same PTZ camera for the wide shot, and they have the individual camera shots for the left and right.
One thing I like about this kind of pop-up studio is that you get, when you're live on location and there's cameras and there's lights, man, it feels like Hollywood. It feels like media. It feels like I'm producing, if you're on the air there, if you're sitting in one of those chairs, you've got to feel a bit more enthused, a bit more motivated, maybe a bit more serious than if you're just in a quiet studio somewhere. Now, I know different programming demands different environments. I get that. But there's certainly a certain amount of excitement that goes with the setup that you see there. And I think that, with much programming, not everything, that excitement translates into better content. What do you think, Chris?
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. I mean, 20, 30 years ago when you did broadcasts outside the studio, you were engaged in the audience, you were on site. Remember, we didn't have smartphones. We didn't have a video media environment back then. So when we did a broadcast on location, it was an event and people came out for it because there was no way to see it at home. You heard it on the radio, you're in the car, you're like, what? My favorite, my afternoon DJ, my DJ guy I drive home with is where? At the shopping mall? I'm going. Today, you don't have to do that. You don't have to go directly. You can just bring it up on your phone. So, it's still, yes, you could say in a very simple way, it's a broadcast, outside broadcast. It's a remote. Okay, call it pop-up studio to be more modern. It's still a remote. Yes, but the times have changed. The way we consume, the way we, digest, ingest, whatever you want to call it, the material is changed. So that pop-up TV studio, radio studio you're looking at in the frame, basically changes the dynamic. It's no longer just 4 people at a table talking about something as the radio station would normally do and expect everybody to come up around them. You can now be anywhere and look at it. And that's what's changed. I think that's great.
Do you remember, Chris, I guess my first exposure to this, gosh, there's been several exposures. I guess the idea of pop-up studios, to me, the name is new. And my wife introduced me to the notion of a pop-up store. So I'd never, look, I'm a typical guy shopper. I go in, get what I need, leave, don't pay attention to whatever else is there. But, the mall kiosk is kind of a pop-up store, but there are also pop-up stores that will rent a location in a mall, a location that was vacant before, and they just rent it for the holidays or whenever their selling season is. So you've got, I've been in mall. We were at Orlando around Thanksgiving, and there were a number of pop-up stores because it was the buying season. And so different makeup companies and maybe a shoe company, they had, products that probably didn't do well enough through the rest of the year, but did pretty well during the holiday Christmas buying season. And so they'd have a pop-up store. So I guess this notion of pop-up is my brain's kind of wrapped around that now. And how is it different from what we did for years anyway? So a pop-up studio, I did some research online, Chris, and there are pop-up studios that are more or less semi-permanent, right? They're like a permanent windowed kiosk in a mall, and logoed and everything, BBC, whatever, and so you might do a regular remote from there, daily, weekly, whatever it might be, and then you also could have very portable things. Like, remember, Chris, back in the days when radio stations had these enormous on-a-trailer portable boom boxes? They looked like a boom box, but it was a studio for the disc jockey to be in. You remember those?
Yeah. I mean, station I worked at, we used to do trade with a motorhome dealer, we would get a motorhome once, whenever we did a broadcast on the road, and we set it up, built the studio in there, and went on the road. We didn't. I worked at a place we had a trailer. You hauled it. You had to have a commercial driver's license to haul it around. But the pop-up concept, or the remote broadcast, whatever you want to call it. What's changed is not what we do as broadcasters and the mechanism by which we get to the audience. It's how the audience now views us, literally, visually, and audibly. And like I was mentioning, the Belgian radio station group of the Flemish broadcaster, and how they have their morning, midday, afternoon drive into presenters working from home. Some people could look at it from pure finance. Well, it's cheaper. You have to have a larger footprint as a building. Okay, fine, whatever. The idea is, if you're a broadcaster, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It's the show. And the fact that they can do it, and now you can do it with a mixer that's a tablet. They're using the reason I caught my attention was because they're using a Lavo product to do this. It's a crystal clear console. Oh, go figure. Mm-hmm. No faders involved. So they're able to take that tablet arrangement and walk anywhere and go anywhere and set up and begin broadcasting. They directly dial back to or connect back to the transmitter facility, and on the air they go. They control everything from that spot. So, these are things that we used to do in the past, either with a board operator, remember that phrase, and then you'd be on location, you had a queuing system between the two. Now you can either eliminate the board operator, or as a safety net, keep them in place and do more with it. So there's all these different things that go on. It's I don't know. I think it's great. In the pop-up studio, pop-up stores, it's the way everything consumes. If you're in Manhattan and a pop-up store appears, it's because the customer base is there, and you have something that there's a need for. You do it.
So back in the day when I was engineering for 98 Rock Double Q or other stations, or I was doing remotes myself, they weren't so fancy. They were typically just an audio link and a microphone. Again, we typically used a Marty when we did such things from the car dealer, the grocery store, the park, the 4th of July, whatever it may be. But these new pop-up studios can get pretty darn sophisticated, as you saw, because nowadays you can either take your automation system with you on a laptop, or you can easily remote control those things. So we used to use, as I keep saying, Marty. Sometimes we'd get equalized phone lines if it was a really big remote. Maybe you in big cities did that a lot. In small towns, we didn't do that a lot. We did a few of those. Or we just call it in with a regular phone line. We hated to do that because it sounded, telephony. So we really liked the Marty if we could get that done. but we were out there all by ourselves. In fact, our metadata, right, our side channel for communication with the studio so often over the Marty was that those horrible words, dip the audio if you can hear me, right? The disc jockey would take the song that was on the air and dip it down for a second. Ah, okay, he hears me. Good, I'll be on next. Yeah. So
it's see, all of these things have changed now. So for the audience, our audience, for those listening and watching This Week in Radio Tech, you need to now think of this in terms of, hey, I'm building a facility. I'm replacing my analog consoles or my hybrid analog digital consoles with new audio over IP products. In the case maybe of a Lavo Crystal Clear or Axia or an Axia Fusion or a Wheatstone product. And you say, okay, what can I do? How do I leverage this to do two things? One, I keep my job. Two, generate revenue that's considered non-traditional or out of the box or somewhere out of left field, so that the management, the owner, whomever, maybe you're the owner, can survive, be in the market and stay in place. If that means doing shows, say a morning drive show is real popular and you don't need to have that person or team in the building. So maybe you factor in the cost of, what would it take to have them on location at home and then be able to go anywhere else they'd like. Our new studios don't have to be a huge facility. We could be a quarter of the size or half the size and still get what we have to get done. You still need an office. You still need a place for people to meet because that's tradition, that's business, that's how it works. But the studio side of things can change a lot. And I think this concept of pop-up studio and the technologies that are at our fingertips is something to start thinking and building into your strategic plan as you move forward. Because I've bumped into several folks over the last few months who have been visiting through New York City and asking questions and say, yeah, we're doing this. We got a project for 2019. We're thinking of rebuilding, blah, blah, blah. And I asked the question, so what's your plan? What are you thinking? How do you expect to change the status quo? And almost every one of them was like, well, we're just going to take what we're doing and convert it to digital. Oh, that's it. Which means you're not thinking about growth. You're not thinking about survival. And the marketplace continues to change, right? I mean, think about it, the streaming competition, the smart speakers. What are we doing in radio to keep up with that? I mean, TV's keeping up with it. They're practicing now what to do with those cord cutters and figuring out how to get their programming out there, maybe not over the traditional cable method, I shouldn't say not, because they do make money off that, but finding ways to augment that change and figure out where they can put themselves. Radio's not doing that very well.
Hey, Chris, Gary Kline is actually getting ready to join us right now. Let me ask our producer, Suncast, if he's ready to bring Gary in or not. Is he ready? I see no video.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Tell you what. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. Gary Kline is in Paris. He's in an Uber right now. It's 11:30 at night, and I think he's finished with dinner finally. But he's going to give us a little bit of his take on what's happening in Europe with regard to these pop-up studios and how popular they are and how fancy they're getting and the technologies involved. Of course, it's probably IP, but the technology is involved in getting signal from that studio to wherever it needs to go, back to a main studio or maybe directly to some cloud infrastructure. We'll be talking about that in just a minute. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you in part by our friends at Angry Audio. Let me tell you about this new product they've got at Angry Audio here as soon as we can roll some video. Studio guests are only human, and humans cough. They sniff and they clear their throats, even on the air. Cure this with the Angry Audio Guest Gizmo. You press the cough button, mute the mic, and every guest needs one. You know what else guests need? They need headphones, which is why each guest Gizmo also has a studio-quality headphone amp with individual volume control. What else? Well, you've seen those mic arms with the built-in LED tallies. They're beautiful, but how do you light them up? Guest Gizmo does that too, illuminating the red LED whenever the mic is hot. And installing the Guest Gizmo in your studio furniture couldn't be easier. All you need is that, a 2 3/4-inch hole saw and a steady hand. No router required. Your studio gets a clean, custom appearance, and you get all the credit. Check out the Guest Gizmo and the other cool gadgets at angryaudio.com. Angryaudio.com. Really appreciate their sponsorship. And you got to check in that Guest Gizmo. Well, Gary is working. He's trying to connect, but it's not entirely working. So we'll continue on, and we'll see if we can get an update from Gary And Gary says he tried, just sits on a dark, small screen. Okay, well, we'll work on that. If we get Gary, great. If we can't, we got plenty to talk about. So Chris, these pop-up studios. Let's talk about the technology for a minute. Of course, IP is everywhere, and with IP, we can get audio back and forth very cleanly. We can get video back and forth very cleanly. We can either create audio there, all our liners and stuff. We can carry that all on a laptop these days, or we can also remote control it if it's somewhere else. What are you seeing people do when they build a pop-up studio? What are the details of how they're connecting back and what they're controlling at the main studio?
Well, there's 2 or 3 that I've come across over the last year. Every one of them has been some type of touch screen console mixer arrangement. They strictly have one IP link back. Well, I shouldn't say one, 2 methods, a dual cellular mobile router, or maybe they're lucky enough to have I'll call it a wired internet plus wireless at their location, so they can do basically for redundancy or for fault tolerance, I'll call it. And the other thing they're doing is they're controlling their music, everything from that spot. It's not relying on anyone back at the studio to press a button. They are in control. And there was one group. They were from Europe. It was a radio station. Oh, what was it again? Shoot, I forget which country it was. They were in just outside Times Square. Well, just off the side of Times Square. I know it sounds kind of weird, but not in the center where Father Duffy Square or the TKTS stairs are. Those are the landmarks people usually know, the red stairs. They were like half a block in, and they were doing everything just wireless on a little pop-up table. It was like one of these little kiosk tables you can fold up and put in a suitcase and go. And they were up and running and doing their thing. I'm like, oh. And they're directly connected with an IP codec. They had an IP codec that they were plugged into. For some reason, they were using hardware rather than software. And that was going
Hey, Gary's here. Let's bring Gary in from Paris. Hey, Gary.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good. We got video. Hey, oh my gosh, you're in the limo.
I'm stretching my hands as far as I can. I got the light on. Can you see me?
I can see you.
Yes, we're good. You're
just fine. Just fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Look here. There's Paris.
Sure enough. It's late at night there. Hey, Gary, I know we've only got you for a few minutes. Tell me what you're excited about, tell me about pop-up radio and what are you seeing in Europe?
Well, they do an amazing job of pop-up radio here. I'm not saying that other people don't or that we don't in the U.S., but they really go to great lengths to do it. Everything from, I think you said you showed the photos earlier, from amazing, live radio and video sets to mobile vans with setups that rival small studios, to smaller things. But they take it pretty seriously, and most of them are doing IP. Some are doing aggregated IP video. I was just at dinner with the folks that run and operate the largest radio group in Russia, and they were showing me one of the concerts they threw. They had 300,000 people there, a live radio setup, and rented a full television production truck to produce the video stream that they sent out with their radio show. So, it's a big deal. And, I don't know how to explain it other than I guess their budgets are a little different, and their approach, to it is a little different than perhaps, ours. But if you go back to the 80s and the 90s, Kirk and Chris, you remember we used to have the big boom boxes. We had a lot of remote vehicles. It's not like we didn't do some of those things before. And I think we have some stations that do that now, but maybe not as wide as it used to be.
It seems like with all the competition that radio stations have from other media, other stations, with the 80-90 docket way back in the 80s, all the more stations that are on now than there were in the 70s, and more came on through the 80s and 90s, all that, you'd think stations would want to really get out there and make themselves known as much as possible. And being on location is certainly still a valid way to do that. I guess European broadcasters are thinking that as well, that it's valid to be on location and be seen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I totally agree with you. And not only did we see setups today here in Paris at the show, I don't have photos of everything I saw because I didn't take photos of everything. I'll send you some more tomorrow. But I also saw a lot of gear, and we've seen this too, even at the NAB and whatnot, and where the modern audio over IP consoles today are capable of running other consoles remotely, and/or you can run your console, your board, and your automation on nothing more than an iPad or an Android tablet. So not only should we be doing it more, to your point, but it's even easier and more efficient to do it. In fact, as I just said, you can run your entire radio show and broadcast high-quality audio to your studio with nothing more than a tablet and a good internet connection. So, I mean, now that doesn't take the place of a nice presence and the banners and the big tables and the mic flags and some lighting, which, typically, if you want to do a nice presentation, but the technology behind it is not that complicated. If you look back at the photos I sent you today, they got this big video setup, but it's nothing more than a couple of computers running software.
Yeah, we were looking at that. Yeah. Hey, oh gosh, what was the last question I was going to ask you? Are there other technologies? I know what it was. You sent some pictures of this company, SAOOTI, and how they provide infrastructure in the cloud for you to assemble a number of different actors, different players, different people with different skills, producers, talent, reporters, to create broadcast programs using mostly equipment up in the cloud. We're showing a picture of their booth right now. What have I got that right as to what they do? Is there more you can tell us about them?
I think you got that right. I mean, they, along with several other companies, some of whom I haven't had a chance to visit yet, but I will visit tomorrow, are offering service in the cloud. In fact, if you jump up a notch or two, we go to a higher level here. Service, software as a service, it seems to be one of the themes that I'm seeing more and more, especially here, where folks are offering things such as podcast production and even automation playback, automation in the cloud. I saw a presentation from RCS today where they've got a version of their software now in the cloud. They said they'll show more of it in April at the NAB, but where we're going to see all of this stuff get virtualized so that really there's not much equipment at the station to do these things. You're logging in, perhaps with a sound card on a local computer, and off you go. Or perhaps the cloud is sending, not in the case of a podcast necessarily, but in the case of automation playback, the software in the cloud is sending the audio potentially directly to your transmitter site via IP.
Yeah, and you've seen this for yourself. This has been actually going on for 5 years at the BBC with their Vylor virtual local radio project, and we've talked about that before on the show. We could add a bit more of it now after you're finished with us. But they've been doing this, having studios that are far simplified in terms of their back-end infrastructure, because now most of their infrastructure is in a couple of data centers, including automation playback, scheduling, codecs, even phones. All their phone systems are all there, and then they send it back out over IP to their transmitter sites. So yeah, that's virtualization right there, and they've simplified a lot their local studios. Gary, is there anything else you want to tell us before you need to go about what you saw today?
No, I mean, I think there are a couple of themes that we're seeing again and again in the industry, and I'm seeing here, at the European Radio Show. Podcasting is big. Software as a service is growing. Virtualization, along with software as a service, is growing. SIP for telephony continues to grow. It's not new, but for a lot of people, it is new and it is growing. And more efficient offerings for virtual radio, cameras, switching, automatic switching, all of that new technology that we've talked about before. I continue to see more and more of it pop up, and it's becoming cheaper and more accessible to the average, I guess, buyer of equipment, average radio station.
It's amazing. I first saw automatic camera switching with a homebrew USB camera system at a radio station in Riga, Latvia. And one of the company engineers wrote the software to do the camera switching. And it was okay. It's more sophisticated now, but it was okay then. So, Gary, I really appreciate you taking the time to call us from your limo there in Paris.
Yeah. Is the quality any good, by the way, on my phone?
Hey, it's a pop-up studio in Paris. There you are.
So we're doing a version of a pop-up studio. We practice what we preach. You got it.
That's right. Gary, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We'll have you on for a whole show sometime in the future with a full report, or maybe close to NAB time. Okay?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry I couldn't join sooner, but I'm here. I made it.
You told us what we need to know, and I really appreciate your contribution. Thanks so much for working on it. Hey, how was the food?
Okay. Oh, the food in Paris?
That's
asking how the food in New Orleans. That's asking me like how the food in New Orleans is. It's great.
I know it's great. It's
great.
You may not get it until 11 p.m., but you're gonna like it.
That's exactly in fact, it was 11 p.m. You're right, exactly.
Yeah,
and we liked it.
Okay. All right, man. You take care. Have a good night, good sleep, and we'll talk to you another time. Take care. All right, that's all. That is fun to practice what we preach. Chris, you and I have done pop-up studios. They just haven't had banners and neon lights and only one camera. That's all.
But see, the whole concept, again, as you pointed out earlier, pop-up studio is just a new phrase of saying remote broadcast or outside broadcast. End of story. Got it. But the difference now is the audience consumes that outside broadcast or remote broadcast differently. So we need to change how we do it. So just as I mentioned, there was a broadcaster in Times Square doing a complete broadcast for their radio program. And to Gary's point, they were connecting directly to their transmitter site. So they went from Times Square, New York City, to some transmitter site in Europe, in their community, doing a broadcast. You can call it a pop-up. You can call it an OB event, whatever you want. But they were engaging their audience somewhere else outside of what people perceive as that little black box on the kitchen table, or maybe the little round speaker sitting on your kitchen table. That's the difference. Now you can see it, you can hear it. And I think that's what's really great. And I would like to see more of that happening. But for some reason, everyone's still, and when I mentioned this to somebody recently, I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we can do these interviews with musicians or artists and not have them have to come to the station, but we go to a predetermined place that we work out an arrangement, which is say, on this date, meet us here, and we'll be doing the interview and the music and whatever it is as an interview, as I called it, a pop-up studio. And everyone's like, well, no, that's not possible. You can't do it. How do you guarantee it won't fail? I said, how do you guarantee a meteorite's not going to hit the building? I said, what does that have to do with anything? And the point is, we're trying to bring somebody to trying to engage. And I just laughed. It was at a college broadcast seminar, conference talking. So I just asked the question. I said, what do you think of this idea? And everyone's like, well, it was more about what you can't do than it was, wow, that's interesting. Never thought of it that way. Right? I don't know why it became so foreign.
Wow. I'm sorry. I'm just thinking of all the possibilities here. And the analogies in our lives already. In New York City, and I get to go there once a year, maybe twice, but in New York City, you've got pop-up everything. You got pop-up halal food. I mean, on every corner. Yeah. Right.
Well, you've got the halal guys on 7th Avenue and 53rd. Those are the original pop-up halals. Those guys are great. They have a line around the corner. Literally.
Absolutely. And
at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll see it.
You've got pop-up tables where you can buy any fake purse you want. Yeah.
This is true.
Scarves. By the way, my wife bought one of those fake purses, and she's comparing it with her real purse now. But,
well, they're pretty good. They're pretty close. With the leather, the colorization change in the leather and the material is slightly different.
Yeah.
But, you'd be surprised. But whether it be pop up here or there, you could use this concept anywhere and make something of it. I mean, think about all the radio stations that have decided to move studio facilities outside of their main area just for the sake of it's cheaper real estate. Okay, great. You're a music station. Now you're on the outskirts of your big city and you want to do an interview with an artist. How much do you have to always haggle to get them to come out to your new facility? When you were in downtown for 20 years, now they can't get to you that easily.
Ah, okay. Right? So the concept there is cheaper rent outside the expensive environs of the big city. So that's where your main facility is. That's where your office is. That's where your salespeople, GM is, and your main studio. But then you do frequent pop-ups in the city of financial interest, if you would, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that you present a presence there, like you're there all the time or often.
Hey, I worked for a major network operation, and we used to do a lot of satellite two-ways, they were called. If you're an affiliate of the network, you'd get a call and say, hey, we have an artist so-and-so who's going to be in the studio taking, questions. Would you like to be on the round table? And be like, yeah, sure. And the affiliates would dial in on ISDN, dial in on telephone to ask the question, and the response of the artist or the guest would be over the satellite channel. Well, the place I worked at, for our studios and offices were not located in the prime financial interest area of New York City. And on many occasions, we couldn't get the artist we wanted to, or the musician or talk show person, or any personality, we'll just call it, because the publicist would tell us, yeah, well, they're on the Today Show. They're going over to the CBS Morning Show, Good Morning America. But you guys you're 25, 30 minutes away from where we are.
Yeah.
Trust me, we were uptown Manhattan. But because of traffic, because of time of day, think of in Midtown Manhattan where all the broadcast studios are that are doing interviews and all these shows. And here we are uptown by, 3 subway stops, but by car, it's almost a half hour. We lost out on so many things. Then what happened was one of our business units opened up a studio in Times Square and said, hey, do you guys want space? And we're like, sure. And all of a sudden now, our little studio, which was literally about the size of my booth here, and another space for the guests to sit and talk, we suddenly were able to book anybody and everybody. Why? We were within walking distance of the GMA studio, the Today Show, CBS, everybody else, because now we're on the circuit. Mind you, this was back in 1995, 96, 97, I'm talking about. We had these issues because technology wasn't such that we could just put up something anywhere. Fast forward to today, and now you should be doing the same thing. You're a music station, then you should be talking to venues in your financial interest area and say, hey, guys, on this date, we're going to have so-and-so in town. Could we make an arrangement to use your space to do the following? Just for a couple of hours. We're not talking a full day, a weekend, some crazy thing. Just pop in, do the thing, boop, out you go. What is that? How do you benefit, right? Somebody in the audience right now is probably saying, what's the point of all that? One, the artist now knows when they talk to you that they're willing to come out to you because you're doing a performance in town, and they don't want to have to break up their sound check or their rhythm because they got to go all the way out of town to get to you for the interview and go all the way back to do their performance, only to do what? Promote a CD that's dropping or is doing something else. What if you say to that artist, hey guys, we're going to come to you. Can you come to us, say 2:00 in the afternoon, the day of your performance? We'll quickly talk, blah, blah, blah. We'll make things happen. I guarantee you 9 out of 10 times, they're going to say yes. Or the publicist will, or the manager. It's going to say, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. We can make time for that, because they don't have to change their routine. Think about it. Nashville, right? Nashville, I'm sure there's several people with studios downtown. I'm hoping that.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't have any issues bringing some artists through and talking with them. Why? Because they're just down the block from that venue that they may be performing at.
Yeah.
But if you're a station that's outside of Nashville that doesn't have facilities in downtown Nashville, what are you doing? Sports, same thing for sports. I worked at a sports station where on many occasions we had to come up with a way to interview sports figures that weren't able to get to our studios because of our location. Yeah. Today, it's easy. I mean, when I was doing this 15, 20 years ago, it was like, yeah, okay, we could figure something out. Let me see, what friends can I call? What favors can I pull in? Where are you going to be? You know what? There's a studio next door. I know the guys that run it. Maybe we could use it for an hour. That kind of stuff used to have to happen. Now, you don't have to. You'd be in a hotel room and do it with them.
Wow.
Or you could be in the backseat of a cab in Paris, France.
In Paris, France. It'd be, and be on a worldwide distributed podcast about radio technology.
Exactly. So to answer the question that I was posed with some time ago, well, how do you guarantee it won't fail? Well, we just did an interview from a gentleman in the backseat of a cab in Paris, France. And did we have any issues with that? No, we didn't. Matter of fact, we skirted the meteorite and the asteroids that were passing by. This is the point I'm trying to make. I know it's funny. But think about it. How many times you sit with somebody, I'm sure you have customers you talk with and like, well, what's the point of me doing that with an Axia product? And you're like, because you can make money doing that? Because now you don't have a barrier to entry. You can actually make things happen. I'm sure there's been a few where you're like, okay, fine. Thank you for the purchase order. I'm out of here. It's just, I just don't get it. I read these articles in these magazines, and as Gary pointed out, in Europe, they're really hot on the idea of doing these things. Pop-up, broadcast, whatever. But it works. They wouldn't do it if it didn't work. At least I don't think.
There are some other positives about this. What appears to me a slight resurgence in doing remote broadcasts or pop-up studios. The pop-up being, more impressive and maybe even a semi-permanent location or a kiosk or signage, that kind of thing. But here's what I see. And I look. This may sound a little Pollyanna-ish. I think it's the second time in our 400 episodes I've used that word. And that is that this is kind of fun for engineers Sometimes we as engineers, we get bogged down in the day-to-day routine and the fixing of the same old stupid things over and over again. And if we just spend some money on this, or just if the people wouldn't quit, just quit breaking that. And this can be fun. And I would just encourage engineers, hey, if people in your station are talking about doing a pop-up studio or remote broadcasts and making something of it, Chris, I can tell. I've known Chris for years, and Chris, you have enjoyed the heck out of making remote broadcasts work using a variety of different technologies, and you've had a lot of fun doing that, right?
I have, but I also, the driving force behind that was because the idea was, at the end of the day, was to make money with it.
Yeah,
I did that with wireless mics in Times Square for a Thanksgiving Day broadcast that went on for 10 years because we were able to make it work. Yeah, so that was a pop-up broadcast.
And I would contend that for engineers watching or listening to the show, that keep your eye out on these technologies and keep your eye out on the way that forward-thinking stations are using these technologies. And by the way, sometimes you got to go outside the U.S. to see that. You got to go look at what European broadcasters are doing. Or I saw an ad for a South African broadcaster doing pop-up studios. And in Australia, they're doing that. I'm sure they are around the world. But maybe in your market, maybe in your station, they're not doing much of that. You might encourage that. You might encourage ways that the station can further monetize. Oh, and the other point I was going to bring up about this is that when stations do these pop-up remotes and they do them, they also involve a lot of social media. So they promote the remote with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and whatever the kids are using these days. It's fun and it's good exposure for the talent. You want the talent to be excited about this. Hey, in the little town of Greenville, Mississippi, at my stations there, we've got a morning guy, DK Pierce, and he loves to go out and do remotes in the afternoon. Now, this guy must be tired because he gets up early in the morning, posts some stuff on Facebook, goes to work, does his whole morning show with the show prep, and then does production after that. And then he goes out and pretty frequently he does remotes, typically at a cell phone company or a gas station or a car dealership. And he's doing these not only on the air, but also on social media. And I know that's good for his brand. So he's branding, he's helping of course, the customer, the client of the radio station. He's helping the station itself, and he's helping himself. And all these things can work well together. I've got another, if you follow me on Facebook, you may have seen I've once in a while I repost things from a friend of mine, a lady who is a presenter, a disc jockey, if you will, in Ajman, United Arab Emirates. Her name is Salon Hamoud, and she is big into social media. Beautiful studio. I mean, the studio itself is just must be fun to work at. It's great to be in. Got to be in there for a couple hours, and but they go out and they do events. I don't know that they do remotes. I guess they do. They do remotes from the events, but they also do social media from the events. So I know it's fun for her, and it's money making because it improves they sell the things, and it improves the look and the stature of the radio station, which is Al Rabia FM, and her own brand. So this goes on around the world, but man, sometimes I just don't see enough of it here in the U.S. I think we really ought to look at that. And engineers, if you're asked, say, yeah, we can do that. We can do that, and then figure out how to get it done, because you absolutely can. Chris, we got a break. Anything else real quick before our tip of the week?
Real quick, I would suggest to our audience, to everyone, whether it's in radio or TV, any opportunity you have as the station techie, okay, I'll just say that, to sit in on a programming meeting, content meeting, whatever they call it these days, or marketing meeting, I would urge that. And I say that because I've been doing it for 30 years. Even if you don't have to contribute, just tell the host, the presenter of the meeting, whatever, say, look, I just want to get a feel for what we're doing outside of my office, so that I know when someone comes knocking, I understand why I'm getting questioned, why I'm getting peppered. And I could also say that I've read something somewhere that this might work for us. Here's why I say that. See this little thing here? What does that say? Companies to watch in 2019. Pretty cool, right? Not a bad magazine topic. So what are the companies? Let's see. Let me quickly tell you. There's Ordinate, Audio Technica, Barracks, Barco, which does displays for television, BenQ, which is video monitors, Matrox, they do video cards for video capturing. Maybe you'd use it for your Facebook Live event. And let's see, who are the other ones? There's a few others that came up. Oh, New Tech. Those are the guys with that thing called, the TriCaster. Wow, that's interesting, right? All these things to watch out for. And there's Shure, Sennheiser, some of the perennials that we all know about. Oddly enough, though, you might be thinking, oh, that must be broadcast engineering or something. No, this is not broadcast engineering. AV technology. Read outside the box. There are other things going on that our industry is impacted by. I just read you from a magazine that's AV technology. You may say, what has that to do with me? You guys have a huddle room? You have a conference room in your building? Guess what? That conference room is serviced by these people. And I just mentioned names that we're familiar with in broadcast. There's that gray area getting even grayer. So just think about it. To look beyond what we're doing and what we used to do, couldn't do, didn't want to do back then, we now have to think about doing. And just remember, you don't want to have to worry about the meteorites or asteroids if you plan properly. Just look at our correspondent in Paris, France today. Backseat of a cab. That was pretty good. Just saying.
Well, as Walter Sabo and others have said, if you've got one of these, you're a reporter.
This is true.
Yeah. And of course, we've all seen, schlocky, poor production on social media. But we're broadcasters. We can do good production with simple tools and get it out there. Well, Chris and I are proof that at least you can do production with simple tools and get it out there. All right. Hey, we've got a couple of tips for you. I've got a brief one coming up, and we're going to hit those. And Chris always has something. And we're going to get to those in just a second. We're going to hear from Lavo. Be right back. Hang on.
There has probably never been a better time in history to buy a new radio mixing console. Today's consoles are more sophisticated than ever, with more features and functions than you can shake a stick at. But have you noticed how complicated they are? There's a sea of knobs and switches and displays and buttons. Some of them look like you might need a pilot's license to do your show. Well, a board doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. Just look at the new Ruby mixing surface from Lavo. The first thing you notice is how smooth and streamlined it is. Ruby has lots of cool tech, but what it doesn't have is that confusing ocean of buttons that clutter things up. Now, we all know that there are some console features the jock only uses once in a while. So why dedicate controls to them? Ruby fixes this problem by moving those once-in-a-blue-moon controls to a touch-sensitive, customizable GUI that happily shares screen space with your other studio software, helping you fight control room clutter. Thanks to this design innovation, talent that use Ruby produce smoother shows with less errors. Controls that are used the most fall naturally to hand, while functions that rarely need adjustment are easily controlled with just a couple of clicks in the context-sensitive GUI. And Ruby has cool features you won't find on other boards, like Auto Mix, an intelligent gain writing function that guarantees the perfect mix for multi-mic morning shows and call-in segments. Dual-mode snapshots that instantly switch the motorized faders between on-air and production modes, and enough DSP and I/O options to make even your pro sound pals green with envy. And because quality is as important to Lavo as it is to you, every console is proudly built to fanatically precise standards at Lavo's own factory in Germany. If you're ready to declutter your control room, do yourself a favor. Check out the new Ruby and the other cool Lavo radio tech at www.lawo.com/TWiRT.
All right. Well, the tip of the week for those of you who have been with us throughout the show, for me, I will say the tip of the week is learn your craft. Learn what there is to do with IP, whether it be voice over IP, video over IP, or audio over IP, or maybe it's wireless. Maybe understand better how 4G and LTE function, how cell phones actually do connect to the network, and why you can sometimes make it work for that broadcast from the backseat of a cab just fine on certain days of the week, and other days it doesn't work. These are things you can find out very easily, and it's very important to understand. I mentioned earlier that I did a broadcast from Times Square on wireless microphones, and for some of you that know Times Square, that is a very hostile RF environment, but I was able to make it work because I understood the concepts behind directional antennas, the idea of a gain antenna and how to make it work, and putting the radiator, the signal, the small antenna of a wireless microphone transmitter, body pack, above the crowd so that you had pretty much line of sight from that antenna back to the directional antenna at the window that we were operating from. So we did it once, it worked. We didn't have to have any stationary position in Times Square. We actually walked around, and we had 4 reporters wireless in Times Square during the Thanksgiving Day parade coverage. That was 1 year, and then we did it for the 9 years after that because it worked. But it was because we understood the principles. It wasn't just, hey, let's give it a try, throw something on the wall and see what sticks. It was actually, we tested it, tried it and understood the limits we had. There are some limitations. So, fast forward to today, do the same thing. Learn the craft. Learn your craft, whether it's building a small studio that's going to have a TV camera in it and lighting because your morning show now wants to do TV. Or maybe you're going on location and you're going to do something from someone's home, or maybe an off-site studio itself, a club. Go in advance, look around, think in terms of the audience. What do they expect? What are they looking at? What do they think of when they see a radio person in a club at an event? And then try and work around it, build up from that. Just don't assume walk in, we'll do this, and this, we're done. Thank you very much. Think of the reasons why you need to have redundant paths out of that place if you're doing it live to radio, or you're just capturing it, then it's different, to tape, so to speak, or recorder. These are things to consider. And I know it sounds kind of rudimentary or maybe old hat or, per se, and say, yeah, we all know that. But I can tell you, I've been to many events where I've watched folks come apart the seams because they didn't think about it. They didn't think it through. And that doesn't take much. And it doesn't, you don't have to be a PhD or a Bachelor of Engineering to know how to do this stuff. It's really just a question of my application, the tools I'm going to use for the application, and what are my limits within that application. That's all. It's like buying a computer. If you're going to buy a laptop, first thing you should think about is what I'm going to use it. I'm going to do video editing. I better make sure it's got some horsepower. Just don't email. And you just get a simple one. You get a Chromebook if you want. But these are things to think about. So for those of you who are starting out, research, learn the craft. Those of us who have been doing it like myself and Kirk, been doing it for many, many years, continue to learn your craft, research, and figure it out. And you'd be surprised at success. Just like we said, we didn't research or test out the idea of Gary from the backseat of a cab in Paris, France, but we had a good idea that he would have something that would probably be stable, and or he would test it beforehand. So there you go.
Well, he had something more stable than I did, apparently, because I got cut off for about a minute and a half. So.
Well, you got family in the house. That trumps everything. You get family in the house, everything goes awry no matter how much you plan.
It actually, it seemed like the problem was external to me. It may have been, some internet, doodly thing. So,
routers outside.
I'm sorry, I missed most of your tip. I'll have to watch the replay. So.
Yes, the on-demand service is very good. We have a very large.
Hey, so I've got my own tip this week for you, and my tip is that, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stop you. Are you finished with your tip?
No, go ahead. Your tip will be fine. Go ahead.
So, as y'all might know, I'm fortunate enough to be on the SBE Board of Directors, and anyway, without going into a long story, we're going to start something. We're going to try a pilot program, and that is an SBE chapter that is on the web, or we're going to have meetings on the web. And our first one is tomorrow. First one is Friday, January 25th, and it's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern time, noon Pacific time. And it's going to be a simple, we're going to actually do it from a Google Hangout. That'll be our production engine, if you will. It'll be a live Google Hangout on air. And although I think that's going away at some time, so Google's decided to kill that about the same time that we decided to use it. But you can watch it on YouTube Live. That's where it'll be, and then it'll be also, of course, saved and recorded on YouTube to the SBE National channel. So SBE WEBxtra is a pilot program. It's called SBE WEBxtra, and it's a pilot program to determine if this format is a good way to engage SBE members. It's an idea that fell out of the Strategic Planning Conference. So you can watch live and comment with me, the host, also Jim Leifer, and Chris Shearer will be there as well. And you can chat with other viewers too, to make your comments, ask your questions. And so the very first one is tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern time, noon Pacific time. And if you're an SBE member, you should have gotten an email about this with even a watch live button. And you will we'll send out another one tomorrow as well, and I'll be promoting it on social media as well. So let's give this thing a try. We're going to see if we can make it easy to participate in an SBE meeting. We still have questions to answer. If you're an SBE member, will you get SBE meeting attendance credit if you watch one of these on the web? And how will we monitor that? Well, it's like anything else, the honor system, but we still have to talk about that, see if that's what we want to do. We're going to try to have guests on SBE WEBxtra that are people who normally couldn't get to talk to SBE meetings themselves. Maybe they're retired, maybe they're not traveling, whatever it may be, but people with a lot of good knowledge and to share. So Anyway, watch for tomorrow, SBE WEBxtra, SBE WEBxtra. And watch live January 25th, 3 p.m. We're going to do 3 months of them, January, February, March, and then evaluate that at our SBE board meeting in April. Chris, I'm done. Are you done?
I'm all done. Yeah, we're good.
All right, good. Thanks a lot to Gary Kline for joining us on the show today. Of course, thanks to Chris for being here and participating in a whole wonderful fashion. We appreciate your expertise. I want to thank Suncast for producing today's show. Appreciate your extra effort there. And also Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network, where you'll find plenty of cool other podcasts, anything from technical stuff to professional wrestling and everything in between. I'm Kirk Harnack in the Telos Alliance studio. We'll hope you'll see us next week for Tom Hartnett from Comrex on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.